I will not spank my kids. And I have heard plenty of dad influencers say, like, we got to go back to, dads spank kids, or like, actually they've said, we've got to go back to beating children. And I'm like, no, we don't ever have to go back there. I don't like gentle parenting because it makes it sound, maybe it's because of being a guy, but I'm like, that sounds such like weak. It sounds weak. I want to be conscious. I'm consciously thinking about what I'm doing. We can change the face of fatherhood in one generation. Because if we'll do it consciously, our kids will unconsciously do the things that we had to work at. When you're on your phone, 8 billion people have access to you. And when you put it aside, you're telling your children, all the world has access to me with this. But I'm putting it away because I want you to have that access and no one else gets it at that moment. You're constantly telling, I love you. Yeah, and you really do. You love them. I love you. I'm your safe place. I care more about you than anyone else in the world. But I'm going to hit you? What? When I was like in my 20s and I had my first kid, I saw a kid in Walmart like having a meltdown, and I walked by and was like, somebody needs spanked. And I'm like, I look at that and I'm like, that guy should get punched in his face.
I can see the enemy approaching the battleground. Hear the drums pound like a thunder sound loud. I gather up my crowd to prepare them for what's coming. We've been summoned.
What's going on? Welcome to Alpha Dad Consulting, a show where we focus on helping dads become better family leaders. I'm your host, G. Vidal, and today we're going to be diving into a part of family leadership that is probably the most rewarding part of it all, but it's also the most difficult to navigate. And that part is parenting. And to have this conversation here today, I invited a very special guest. He is a successful entrepreneur who's built an incredible brand and Instagram page with over 184,000 followers around the idea that dads don't babysit. He's taken on the mission to challenge the traditional authoritarian parenting style that many of us dads fall prey to by mentoring dads to parent in a way that leads to long-lasting connection with their kids, instead of relying on fear-based tactics to get them to do what you want. And on top of all of that, he is a devoted husband and father of 6 who all range from college age to infant age. So he's well-versed in the dad game, and he's going to give us some of that wisdom here today. I want to welcome to the show, Mr. Nate Feathers. What's going on, brother?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for this one. Dude, so to give you, let's kind of set the stage a little bit.
Yeah.
Rewind 5-6 years ago, right? I'm jumping into the online business world of entrepreneurship. I'm hearing all this, like, you can make passive income and you can do all this, right? So I'm jumping into like Amazon FBA, drop shipping. You're probably familiar with all this, SMMA, like social media marketing agency, because of Ty Lopez's whatever, famous ad, right? I'm in my garage with the Lamborghini and all that, right? So I'm falling for all of it, bro. Right. I'm diving in, and it opens up this world of possibilities for me. It's not all negative, but I dive in and try to do all these different things, and I fail miserably at every single one of them. And ultimately it leads me to, after like it takes me a couple years, and I land on this whole idea of like, dude, I love working with dads. Like I get hit up by dads all the time about marriage issues and fatherhood and, with mindset, right? Whatever it is, I'm always the guy people are calling, and, at least in my circle and in the group of friends that I have. So it's almost like God's leading me to this purpose, right? Where I'm like, I can't ignore this. So I decide 4 years ago now to start this YouTube channel. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to start a channel and just post a video of like my experiences and, what I went through growing up, trouble that we had in our marriage, how we conquered that and everything. Right. And I just start working with dads. That's all I have is the North Star that I want to work with dads. That's it. Right. I don't know how. I don't know what I'm going to help them with. I don't know the niche and the avatar and all the specifics that you want in a business. Right. So over the course of these 4 years now, like it's been modified, the message has been adjusted, the tag, like everything, like, and it's still being refined. Right. But ultimately, man, the true North Star of helping dads has always been there. Yeah. And that's where I want to be. And that's what I've come to love, man. And it's definitely a purpose and a mission. And I feel like you and I share that.
Yeah.
And what I want to know is just, where did that come from for you? Right. And how did that origin story begin for you, man?
Man, I'll give you I'll go short, like just a small distance back, and then I'll go way back, because
Okay.
it's kind of interesting how it all works. And I didn't really realize all that was happening underneath until I got further into it and I saw the Instagram page starting to grow and things like that. So short version, the short side of it was I had been posting, and everybody has this. It's so funny because kids today, like their number one thing they want to be is a YouTuber. And I remember when my oldest, like, Dad, I want to be a YouTuber like Jake Paul. And I'm like, oh, dude, that is, I don't see how that's going to go. Right. But at the same time, here I am sharing on Instagram and sharing on Facebook because I'm old. And I'm doing that. I'm doing videos. At one point, I was doing videos on Facebook I was doing a lot about health. And that's kind of where my real journey started, because I was starting to get healthier and realizing how important that was. And so I'm telling him, okay, cool, work on the YouTube thing, but also I'm thinking about it now, going, man, why did I tell him to have a backup? But um, he went to college, and I sat down on the front porch and was like, it's over. And that's scary to say because it's not like it's fully over. But what hit me was he's no longer in the house living and eating and being with us. You get, if your kids do the whole go to college after high school, then you get 18-ish years with them, and then they're off to college. Like, I left home 3 hours away, that kind of thing, right? And I was gone.
Yeah.
And I had that moment where I thought that it's all over because I was thinking of all those things. And then I had that moment, where they say, like, right before you die, you have that, like that your life flashes before your eyes. Well, I had
Yeah.
his life flash before my eyes, and I regretted so much. I was like, I could have been so much better. I could have been so much nicer. That was the thing, is I was like authoritarian style with a lot of anger too. Like, there was a lot of that in there, right? And I'm sitting there thinking that it was like, well, that's what you're supposed to do because that's how I was raised. And I'm not bashing Dad. He wasn't always angry, but uh, that's the way it felt. And I didn't want to be around him growing up, not because he was mean or an angry person, but because he was Dad, and like, who wants to be around their father? That's kind of the way that went. And so I'm watching in my mind's in my mind's eye, all this video of my son's life. And I'm just like regretting it all. I could have been nicer. I could have been around more. I should have taken him with me, all of those things. And I shot a video that was basically veteran advice from a father of five, on what to do. And because at that time I had 5 kids, my youngest at that point was like, shoot, 2, right? So he's going to college and she's 2, and I got some in between. And I thought, I don't want to have this same problem when the next one graduates, and definitely not when the third one graduates, because there's a big gap there. And so
Yeah.
I shared that, and I just felt like that's what really started the process for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, no dad should feel the way I feel right now, because it's awful. And if I can help dads not have that feeling when their kid goes off to the workforce or out of their house or off to college, then that is what I want to do. And the long side of that is I was a pastor beforehand, so I was already helping people and teaching, and I had these visions of leading thousands of people. And I was told at that time, when I had those visions, that that was arrogant. And I remember being like, look,
Interesting.
this terrifies me to death. It's not an arrogance thing, because if I could get away from this feeling, I would leave, because it's terrifying. I
Yeah.
definitely resonated with Moses going, can you send somebody else? That kind of thing. Although I taught and had worked and had been doing all that, when I got there and I saw this vision of thousands of people, I was like, I was terrified. And then to have people that were very close to me say, that's arrogant. And what if that's not you? What if God wants you to do something small? To the level where now, as a father further on, I go, no dad wants his kid to live small. Why would the Heavenly Father want his kids to live small? And so I mean, we can go through that whole part of life, but basically imploded my life, and like the church went away, and I kind of like went into, I wouldn't say hiding, but just went into like the wilderness, if you want to call it that. Found the God that I really believe, the uncaged version of God is the way I see it. And that, like, then I started really seeing, as I watched my kids grow, I would see things and be like, God, I love them so much. And God would just whisper, and I did a reel on this too, but God would just whisper, that's how I feel about you. Like, I feel like you feel right now about your kids. That's how I feel about you always. And it
Yeah.
changed my understanding of God. And then as this built, I had a friend from college who was in the ministry program that I was in. He's like, Nate, you just built a church of 184,000 people. And that vision has come to, not, I wouldn't say full fruition, because now I want it to keep going. I keep telling dads we can change the face of fatherhood in one generation, because if we'll do it consciously, our kids will parent. We all parent how we were parented. So if we'll
Yeah.
do it consciously, our kids will unconsciously do the things that we had to work at. And we can literally change the way men interact with their kids in one generation. And I love that. That gets me hyped.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. Mine are six. So I have a 6-year-old son, Ethan. He's the oldest.
Hmm.
Then I have Mia. She's 3.
Hmm.
She's the girl smacked in the middle of the two enforcers, with my little one being 1, Eli.
Nice.
And they're all very different, all
Yeah.
very different personality. So as you tell that story about your oldest and being in that moment, man, I'm fast forwarding in my mind,
Yeah.
picturing that, like, man, yeah, that would be very difficult to know,
Oh,
you know. And even now, man, I look at, just him being 6 and how much he's grown already, the questions he's asking now
mhm.
versus, before, and like his intuitive mind, he picks up on things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just, it's wild, man.
Yeah.
And you have that inevitable like weight of responsibility where you're like, I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah,
You know,
right? It's a whole
I don't
human. I
mess
don't wanna
this
mess
up.
them up.
Yeah, I really don't. And you think, because you'll compare, right, to your dad or your parents and how you were raised, and like, well, maybe that was good, but maybe this, I'm gonna do it differently, right?
Yeah,
And you do
yeah,
it differently, thinking it's gonna be a different result, right? And it's gonna be a better result. Like, oh, I'm gonna do it better than my
yeah.
dad or better than my parents. And all of a sudden, you start seeing some of those outcomes, sprinkled
Mm,
out, and you're like, wait a minute, that didn't turn out the way. It's just, it's an interesting game, man. I
it
think
is.
I heard Pat Bet David, if you're familiar with him,
Oh, yeah,
PBD.
yeah,
Yeah, he said something along he's like super like parent, he
yeah,
loves fatherhood and being a dad. But one of the things he said is that parenthood is the report card for parenthood. You don't get it until like they're adults and they have their own families. Like, you're not going to know what your grade is for parenthood until then,
right,
because you've already gone in and poured in on those kids, and they're going to have those foundational things that you taught them,
right.
but you won't know the effects of that until much, much later, man. And
Yeah.
it's a
Oh,
scary thought, bro.
yeah, it really is. I
Yeah.
was telling my wife stays at home, and
Okay.
she's like, I saw this video where it was talking about mothers, and mothers who were productive before they had kids, like they had a
Yeah.
career and they did all this. And I said, that was you. I said, the reason it's hard on those kind of moms is because there's no productivity. Like, you don't even get to
Mhm.
get a load of laundry done without a stop in the middle. You're folding laundry and a kid's like poopy, and then they're tired, and then they need to eat, and it's like, I'm like, you don't not only get the actual finished product inside of a normal time frame, you also don't get the accolades that a
Mhm.
business may give you. You get none of that. I'm like, and so it's this investment where, if you like, you're just investing. Oh, it's the long-term game, right? So you're just investing, you're just continuing to deposit, and there's nothing coming out. And then at, like, 20 years later, it's just like compounding interest on the money you're putting in your 401k or whatever. Is 20 years later, you have this. That's when you see all the things that come out, and you're like, oh, you. That's the terrifying part too, because you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what if I screwed them all up while I was doing what I thought was right?
Yeah, man. And I think that's and that's the underlying thing where I look at, my dad and our parents, right? That they did the best they could with the information that was available to them, right? And the
Yeah,
way that they were parented, like you said earlier. And, and for a long time, man, I was holding a lot of that against them, right?
yeah,
But now, as I've gotten older and I have my own kids, I'm like looking back, I'm like, man, well, they didn't have a Nate Feathers, Instagram page to follow. You
right.
know what I mean? Like, where
Yeah,
where you would hear something different, a different perspective.
Right.
Like they were just limited to what their experience was. And if
Right.
their experience was like, hey, spanking and yelling and doing all like being that authoritarian parenting
Mm.
style,
Yeah.
then that's all they knew. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, man.
I will say that, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 44. I'll be 45 this year, and so I have the experience of like straddling the whole Instagram, being where there was no internet to where there
Yeah.
is internet. And so, and even as I grew into my parenting, like my oldest was born when I was 23. So in 2003, we had Facebook, but we didn't have like Facebook was nothing like it is today. Social media was
Yeah.
nothing like it is today.
Yeah.
So nobody was doing that even on Facebook then. You're just sharing pictures of your video of like your vacations and stuff.
Yeah.
And I realized that as a result of that, I can say I parented the way my parents parented,
Yeah.
and I think I had the same mindset as my dad back then too. And that really was like, parenting is like, I'm not reading a book on parenting specifically because as a man,
Yeah.
most books written by people that are writing to parents, they're writing to moms. And so
Yeah.
you're not even getting the male perspective generally when you're reading a book back then on parenting, because it was from a woman's perspective. And no offense to the ladies, but you're not a dad, and you're definitely not a man, so you don't understand any of the stuff that we understand as parents. So as a dad, what book would I read right before that? And there was none of this, right?
Yeah.
So it was just, I literally at one point looked at my son and said, dude, I don't even know what I'm doing. I was your age once, but I wasn't a parent of your age until now. I'm just throwing stuff at the wall hoping it sticks. I don't know. you know
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
that's
And
kind of the way you feel about it.
that, dude, and that's it, and that's it. Like, I've never been a dad of a 6-year-old until this
Right.
stage right now. You know what I mean? So I've never, so and a dad of a 6 and a 3 and a 1-year-old at the same time. Like I've never
Yeah.
done that until right now. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure it out.
Absolutely. They're also growing up in a totally different world than we did.
Very
So
much so.
you really don't even know how to do it based on what you experienced. And we don't understand that very well, but we
Yeah.
really don't know how to even help them interact with their own world because our experience was so completely different than theirs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awful.
I look at that, bro. I look at that and I'm like, my daughter, right? Can I watch Moana? And I'm like, yeah, all I have to do is press play. Like go to the streaming app and just
Mm-hmm.
look, Moana's on.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. I didn't have to take the VHS tape out and rewind it. Put it in that car. Remember the car,
Right.
the car,
Yeah.
the car rewinder. You put it in there
Yeah.
for it to rewind the tape, and then like put in the VCR, and
Yeah.
like, oh, cool. And if you missed the part, man, you got to rewind back. Got to go back to the VCR, push the button to, like,
Oh yeah.
dude. None of that. None of that. It's so easy now. And then, but at the same time, right, like the conveniences, but also the distractions, right? Like
Yeah.
all the social media, like the things that are out there now.
Yeah.
But dude, I want to go back to something you were mentioning when you were telling the story about the origin story,
Yeah.
the anger and the irritability that we
Mm.
see, right? Because I've experienced this, and I'll speak from my experience. Like, you're building a business, you're the entrepreneurial dad, you're in that zone, right? Where you're focused on work, you're writing something, you're doing something, you're moving the needle forward for the purpose of the family and to get us ahead. And like
Yeah.
the reason behind it is never something negative. It's
Yeah.
always like for the benefit of the whole family. You're working hard,
Right.
but your kid comes in and interrupts that moment, right? Of you while you're working,
Yeah.
and you snap at them, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, hey, get out of the office. Like, what are you doing? Like you get that irritable, dude, and then it carries in, right? You go into another room, you go into the kitchen, you see them having fun. Sometimes you'll mess up the energy, and I've done this, of the room because you walk in irritable because of something that happened, work related, some
Yeah.
issue, a client, whatever, right? And how do we combat that, man? How do we get to a point of like having this self-awareness to not fall prey to that, because it's so easy to
Oh,
just snap into it.
that's a great question, and I don't know if I have the answer to that because I
Mm.
can tell you, like, I work so hard to be the man that I say I am on Instagram. Like, it's not a highlight reel for me; that is life for
Yeah.
me. And so, but what you got to know is that there are points. like we all get frustrated. Like that's not a bad emotion. It's an emotion.
Yeah.
It's those feelings we have, right? It's what we do. And I tell my kids this. It's like telling a grown man the same thing I tell my 8-year-old is like, we all have those. I'm never going to be mad at you or upset with you when you're happy. That's weird. Like I use that as the example because that's a weird one. Oh, he's happy. Now I'm not happy with him, right? That's
Yeah.
crazy. But then anger pops up and now you get told you're not allowed to do that or whatever, and so it's almost like we're pushing away an emotion that's just the opposite side of happy. I'm happy or I'm mad, right?
Yeah.
It's not that you're mad, it's what you do with being mad, right? And so I think as dads, a lot of that comes back to there's the stress, and there's the stress of being a provider. If you're in my situation, like I work and my wife works at home with the kids, and so but mine pays and hers pays the dividends way later in our kids being grown, right? That's how
Yeah.
that pays. Um,
Absolutely.
but when it comes to that, there's stress and there's frustration going on with work. I think that like you can't ignore that. The only thing you really can do is if you work at home and you're in the office, you got
Mhm.
to like close down work, and I really mean close it down. Like shut, like the shutting of the laptop needs to be like a sacred experience of this now is closed for the day.
Mm.
And then I'm going to sit back and take 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever to breathe in and breathe out and slow my roll and get cognitively ready for what I'm about to walk into outside.
Yeah.
And I try to do that as much as possible because you have to reset your brain to a different thing. Like this is all about the computer and work. That's all about productivity and creating and doing. And
Yeah.
children have nothing to do with productivity. Like that's why when my wife is trying to do laundry, she's frustrated in those moments because she's always interrupted or something's going to slow that down. You cannot be productive with kids, in my opinion, because they will either be ignored or they will get the attention that they need and you won't be productive. So you kind of have to just like shift gears. Like, did you ever drive a stick shift?
Yeah. That was my
Okay.
first
So
car. Yeah.
that's like a Gen Z anti-theft device, um, but
It's so good.
like, you don't just
Yeah.
you're not going down the highway in fifth gear and then cram it into reverse. Like you wouldn't do that with an automatic either. But
No.
like you can't like we used to say, can't find them, grind them, because you just couldn't get the clutch to work or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's that same concept. I have to press the clutch in. That's my breathing, and then downshift and slow it down and
Yeah.
come to a stop and then put it in reverse. And that's kind of the way you got to look at shifting gears to go in with kids, because there's no more productivity once you bring them in, and you need to know that, or at least know that productivity is slowed tremendously because they deserve the attention.
Yeah, man. And that's another big one, right? Deserving the attention and switching it. Like you're, you know, doing this, right?
Yeah,
And then they're talking to you and you're still doing this, right? And it's like, yeah, yeah, son, I'll be right there. Dude, all like it's happened,
all the time.
man. Like, oh yeah. And it's you may be doing work and you may be doing
Hmm.
something important,
Hmm.
but it doesn't matter to them.
No, it doesn't.
To them, it's like dad's ignoring me right now.
Exactly. I literally had this
Like,
conversation with my 9-year-old today. I was
really?
working on
That's so funny.
sent over.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh crap, I didn't do that. I got to get that sent over to him. So I'm like, hey, I'm working, and I'm like doing that, and he comes up and he starts talking to me, and I said to him, hey man, listen, this is work. Let me do this because you deserve my full attention. This requires my attention right now, but you deserve my full attention, and it's not fair to you if I faces in my phone and you're talking to me. And he's like, yeah. And I said, if I'm doing that, do you feel like I'm listening? And he's like, no, I don't. I said, okay, let me finish this because it should, I mean, 5 minutes, and then I will focus in on what you're trying to show me. But I try to teach them with that specific, because that happens all, like that's every household, right? We
Yeah.
have our phones attached to us. Is that I don't want them to interrupt me, one, because that is rude. We do see that as rude.
Mhm.
However, they deserve better as well. So if you're interrupting me while I'm trying to do something, you actually don't get what you deserve either, and that's not fair to you. So,
Mhm.
come touch my shoulder or whatever, and I'll be like, "Hey, give me 5 minutes. I'll be right with you." And then we do that. Or I just put the stinking phone down and don't, you know what I mean? Like you can do work, it just probably just not do it in your like outside, and I'm not good at that either. I'll pick it up and be doing something, but I have definitely, I think most of us, really struggle with that, pulling our phone up and half-assing our conversations and our attention. And honestly, no one can multitask, in my opinion. So when
No,
you're on
man.
your phone, you're not paying attention to anything else.
Yeah, no, you're not multitasking for sure.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
no, nothing gets
yeah.
100%. Just what are
Yeah,
we
it's a
doing?
myth. Yeah. No, I love the way you phrase that, because what you did there, and this is what I'm gathering from that, is just kind of explaining what's actually happening, right? Like acknowledging, like, hey, I know you're here, and I do want to pay attention to you, and I want to give you my full attention. However, there's something that's demanding my attention right now that I need to take care of first, and then in just 5 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and give you my full attention, bud. Like,
Hmm.
but you're giving them that explanation. That I think is a great approach, as opposed to not, right? Like not saying anything and just letting however they're perceiving that moment sink in, as opposed to you jumping on it before they perceive it that way, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's a yeah, I like that, man. I like that a lot. It's really
Thanks, man.
good.
Yeah. I forget who it was I saw. It might have been Ryan Holiday. I know he does a lot of dad
Mm,
stuff. I can't remember if it was him or not, but he basically said when you're on your phone, 8 billion people have access to you. And
wow.
when you put it aside, you're telling your children, all the world has access to me with this. But I'm
Mm,
putting it away because I want you to have that access and no one else gets it at that moment. And that, I think that speaks volume.
wow.
But if we just keep staying like this, looking at our phone, I mean, whether we like it or not, we tell them that they're not important, and they are so much more important than that stupid screen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I agree. I love that too. That's awesome. I didn't know Ryan Holiday was this is the stoicism guy, right?
I'm
The
pretty
Ryan
sure that
Holiday? Is that him?
I,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, he does the Daily Dad, and
Oh,
I
really?
think
Okay.
that's him, but I could be wrong. And I mean, I'll definitely send it to you when I
Okay.
find. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, that's
sure Ryan
awesome.
Holiday does some dad stuff that I really have enjoyed.
Yeah, that analogy is really good. I like that.
You're right.
Yeah, that's really good, man. Dude, so the concept, right? The dads don't babysit,
Yeah.
because I remember my wife and I, we were probably like the last couple within our close groups of friends to have kids. Like we,
Yeah.
we were the last one, and it just didn't happen for us,
Sure.
until much later. But I remember, talking to a lot of my friends, and like saying, I'm the guy that doesn't have
No.
kids, right?
Yeah.
So I'm hitting them up over the weekend, like, hey, you want to go? Let's go watch a movie, dude. Let's go do something. Nah, man, I got to babysit the kids tonight.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was a common thing, right? So talk to me about where that concept comes from, man, and why it's not the right way or the right perception to
Yeah.
have as a dad.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, it was from a conversation with a friend of mine, and I've never mentioned his name. He probably, if he hears it, he's like, "That's me. I know it." But I've never mentioned who it is. But he was on. He had had his first kid. I think I was at 3 or 4 by that time.
Okay.
But he had an infant, and he called me about a business conversation. And so he's walking on a treadmill and on the phone with me, and was patching somebody else in for us to have this 3-way conversation. And he says to me, "Hey man, I'm babysitting the little," and I mean we're talking tiny little nugget, right?
Yeah.
Infant. And he's like, "I'm babysitting the little, so if you hear something, it's probably him." And I was like, "That's cool, man. Yeah, no worries." And I said, "Hey, before we go any further, you're not babysitting. Like dads don't babysit. You're being a dad. That's the verb. You're fathering a child,
Yeah.
and part of that is doing what you're doing." And I've gotten to the point now from that I'm like, dude, if your kids came busting in here right now, I'd be like, well, that's fatherhood. That's the way it works. You're at home and how it works. If my kid, which I can tell you right now, the one that will come in here is my 8-year-old Wyatt. He will open that door and he'll walk up and he'll poke his head up and just try to be like, hi.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know I'm dads don't babysit and it's kind of normal, but I would do that when I was on conference calls. I'd be like, yeah, there he is. Sorry guys, whatever. I got to the point where I had a company that was like, yeah, you can't have that happen. And I was like, then we're not aligned, and I'm out. And
Yeah.
I left because my kids are way more important than somebody's feelings about my conversations while we're on it. And I know that's probably not the way it should be, but I was so frustrated at that moment that I was like, dude, I'm never babysitting my children. I want them to have access to me. Does that mean they be busted in the door? No, they need to learn patience, and I have to teach them that. But they're also 8 and 9, right? They
Yeah.
don't remember all that stuff, and so that's the thing. It's like the kids on an airplane, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's everyone's annoyed that there's a kid on the airplane sitting next to them and they're screaming and all that. and you see the mom's face, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is ruining everybody's flight." Well,
She's
everyone
embarrassed. Yeah.
adult. You know what I mean? Everyone else is an adult. We all know what happens with kids. And then all of a sudden they pressurize the cabin, and that little kid's like, "What is going on?"
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing. You can't sit there and expect a kid to be quiet on a 3-hour flight. So don't expect them to bust in the door and do just they're children. We got to let them be children and remember that we're the adults and we'll figure it out.
It's part, dude, it's part of life, man. Like this
Right?
is like it's what it's about, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think people lose sight of that, man. That it's I'm when you were telling that story about your 8-year old just popping in, right? I was remembering there was a on the Apogee side, right? There was a mentor call that we had. And you've been on the Apogee calls, you know how they come up and they ask you questions, right? Like
Oh,
because you're the mentor coming in.
yeah.
So we had a guy, man, that was he was like a social media guy. His name's Sun Yi.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever seen any of his stuff. He's phenomenal, like content creator.
Yeah.
And I being a content creator myself, I go and I'm asking him a question. So I'm in the middle, I'm on the screen with Matt, Sun Yi, and I'm right there spotlighted as well, right? And I could send you the clip, man. But so I'm there, I'm trying to keep a straight face because I hear the door open, you know, like my office door go open. I'm like, oh crap, like my son's coming in. And I'm listening to the guy answering my question about
Yeah.
content creation. And I'm like, this is important, right?
Yeah.
And I see the you just see on the camera the chair, the office chair comes like rolling over, okay? And then all you see is Spider-Man pop out, bro, because he's in
Yes.
full costume, like full costume, okay? Miles Morales, like black suit
Oh,
Spider-Man,
yeah.
right? And he just pops up right next to me, propped up on top of the desk chair, and he's just like, he's like waving away. I didn't
Uh,
get mad. I was just like, and that's Spider-Man. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, and he's like, hi, Spider-Man. Like, so everybody was cool with it. Everybody understood it.
yeah.
But it was a fun moment, bro. Like, and
Yeah.
now it's a story that I can tell, right? But,
I,
um,
I
you
love
know,
it.
man, and any other given scenario, like you were talking about the corporate world, right? Something like
Hmm.
that would happen where they don't align with those types of values and they're not about family, right?
Hmm.
It's more corporate and I want to make the money and all that. Like, and there's a place for that, you know, but dude, don't lose sight of why we're doing this. Like, don't lose
Yeah.
sight of why we're going to work in the first place. It's to provide for our families. It's to provide and to give them a better life, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, man. So I resonate with what you're saying. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying there. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I've seen it multiple times where I've seen like the meme that says, no one will remember how much overtime you worked except for your kids. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, that's awesome.
Powerful.
Like, it's just the nature of my job is I like tonight I'll go to Knoxville and I'll be there for a few days. And then when I
Mhm.
come back, I'm home, like I'm going back and forth to the office like every day for a while. And then I spend, uh, after 3 weeks, I'll spend some time out, just outside of Nashville. Like, I think it's 3 days where I'm gone. And that's the rotation of and then I'm home for like 10 days. So there's a rotation of our life. But like from my standpoint, it's like I want them around me as much as possible.
Yeah.
So like the whole point is, like you said, my kids are they remember when like they're going to remember that I wasn't home at certain points. So I need to make sure that those points are low points in life. That way they're like, yeah, dad missed my big game. That is not
Mhm.
something I want to be a memory of theirs, right? Or dad
Yeah.
wasn't there, this or that. I love it when they're like, Dad, what do you do? Because you're always around. Love. And I
Yeah.
had that question happen. Then I'm like, and I just laugh. I'm like, yeah, I do stuff. It's fine. Like that's what I want.
Yeah, that access, man. I like that too. That was one thing I learned very much so during like the COVID time, right?
Hmm.
Where they sent everybody home and like, you know, coming from the corporate world myself, I got to experience what it was like to be home with my then 2-year old at the time. And I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I'm getting to watch him like say this word and like learning this. Like he would be with me like on my lap as I'm working and you know and
Hmm.
doing something on there, like doing spreadsheet work or whatever, you know.
Sure.
But he'd be there with me on my lap, and I have pictures. Like my wife took pictures of that, and she's stay at home mom too. So you know, single income household. So I was doing that, man. But I really loved working from home
Mhm.
and I love not being away from him. So I figured out a way to just work from home, and that's how it's been for all of my kids now, where they have access to both of us.
Yeah.
Granted, I am like in my office and I do work, and they do, but it's really cool, man, that I can go downstairs for like 15 minutes and just like play freaking like we're slaying dragons with some fake swords. You know what I mean? Like we're goofing off, and
Yeah.
I can do that with him, and he'll bring dinosaurs over, and we'll like, hey, let's play some dinosaur roar, and like, doing that whole thing. And
Yeah.
dude, there's nothing like I wouldn't give that up. Like I want to fight for that as much as possible.
I agree.
Yeah, man. So
Yeah. It's unfortunate because prior to the Industrial Revolution, most people would live on a farm and farm for basically for themselves. I mean, you might barter and trade stuff that you grew or caught or
yeah,
hunted, and people would like did that. And so mom was in the home raising the babies, and when they
yeah,
got to a certain level, if they were boys, they went with dad. And that's the thing for me is how do I like we lost that, right? We completely lost that during the Industrial Revolution with men going to work and going into these industries where they had to be clocked in and they had to be there till the whistle blew,
yeah,
and now they're separated from the family. And I've got all sorts of conspiracy theories about some of that stuff, but
yeah, man.
regardless of what regardless of what the purpose was, it happened that dad was taken out of the home, and for the purposes of ease, I think, which is okay. Like as society grows, we find, oh, it's easier if I do this. But what we lost was the connection to our children, namely our sons, right?
Mm,
Where we taught them to be men. You went out into the field, and I think about this even when I look at my sons doing stuff,
yeah,
when I'm at the gym or when we're whatever, and they're doing stuff and I'm watching them and I'm like, that's not going to work out very well. But I wait and then something like hits them or whatever. I'm like, ooh. And I'm like, you all right? And he's like, yeah. And then I go, all right, this is why that happened. And I'm teaching them like things of life. And I just think about being out in the field and they're struggling and the dad watching and then being like, hey, I used to do the same thing. This is what my dad showed me. This is why I do it this way. And we're teaching them how to be men. That's the way it was then. And we
yeah,
lost that. But I really believe that the age of information is bringing that back. Like you said, you
mm,
figured out how to stay home. COVID really taught people I don't have to go somewhere to do what these people want. And now we have the internet, we have all this access. Like, where are you at right now?
I'm in Texas, just north of
Yeah.
Dallas. Yeah,
Right. So, I mean, for us to even have this conversation, look at how much makes this easy now that we would never have done this before, right? And
yeah,
so the information, in my opinion, and the age of the internet has created the opportunity for dads to be more involved and to go back to that time of connection when our kid before the industrial revolution where we were kind of taken out of the house. And I love that. I think if every man, I bet, and this is only just a guess, but I bet every man would rather spend more time with his family than less.
yeah.
And the internet and jobs like this allow that to happen a lot more, which I love. And I think we should take advantage of it at every chance we get.
Yeah, there's this beautiful kind of complementary design, man. That taking from what you said about like the dad taking the son and like showing him how to be a man and do this that right, and the complementary design of like the woman, the mother and the dad, right, and
Hmm.
how it's not this combative thing of
Right.
like who's right, who's wrong, who's better, who's not. Like, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, no, you're have a role that to make this family functional and to make this family work and be effective. You have a particular role and strengths and things that you can bring to, like, my wife. She's great nurturer. She takes care of them. She makes sure, I mean, they wouldn't get fed, man, every day if it wasn't for my wife. But with me, right, like then they get the other thing where it's like, I can teach them some of the lessons that I've learned. Dads have this tendency too of being able to, like you were saying with your son, watching him mess up in the gym, letting him learn from his own experience. He might get hurt, but you're okay with it. You can
Hmm.
step back and you can kind of watch them wrestle, struggle, deal with a little bit of adversity, a little bit of pain, right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and you can do that as a dad, whereas a mom sometimes they have trouble, right? Like, I'll give you an example, and my wife and I, we don't fight over this, but it's a funny one. And I think, I don't know, because one of the things that Riverside allows you to do is that it allows people to watch live. So I have like an access point for some of my
Yeah.
members in my community.
Yeah.
So I don't know if my wife's on here right now watching, but she'll get a kick out of this. Um, but she'll we drink soup, like she'll make like chicken soup or something, right?
Hmm.
And I remember when I was a kid, I had to drink that soup hot, like burn my tongue, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And my wife will throw some ice cubes in the soup, to make
Yeah.
it a little warmer for them and this and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've told her like, we throwing ice cubes in there, like just let them drink it like how it's supposed to. They got to burn their tongue, let them burn their tongue. They'll be fine. It's not like, it's just something simple, right? But it's like, I'm
Yeah.
okay with letting my son or my daughter like drink some hot soup and being like, like that's hot, like, and blowing on the spoonful of soup before they eat it. Like I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
But it's like
Absolutely.
these little things, man, where she's more like, I don't want him to deal with pain, where I'm like, yeah, let him, or we
Be all
were
right.
doing we were doing like a 100 push-up challenge thing with my son, right?
Hmm.
Like we're like, hey, let's do 100 push-ups a day, this and that.
Yeah.
Man, he just busted his arms. He has a fractured bone from something
Oh,
else that happened, so he's out of commission for a little bit. But
yikes.
we were starting that challenge, and it was his idea. He's like, let's do 100 push-ups for 100 days. I'm like, cool, dude, let's do it. Let's rock it.
Yeah.
And he's getting into it. And he's getting sore, right?
Yeah.
And my wife's like, well, he's gonna be sore. It's probably gonna be a little too much because then he has martial arts. I'm like, he'll be
Uh-huh.
fine. Like he can handle it.
Yep.
He's fine. Like he can do it. If
Totally
my
true.
old fart self can do it, like he can do it. Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah, man.
but or like I've done CrossFit, and that's kind
Okay.
of where I like to stay. I've done fighting,
Yeah.
but I found that I'm like, what you have to give into is that I'm sore every day. Like every day, something hurts, and because of the desire to train.
Yeah.
So he's doing that early, right? I mean, just that you got to function in the pain because that's just kind of the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny,
Yeah.
man.
No, I
Um,
love that. I love that so much because in my opinion, and coming back to how we parent.
mhm,
A lot of dads, we punish, and we call it discipline, but
yeah.
it's a punitive thing. Like you messed up and you did this, and so you get this consequence. And that's where I divert. I think that's what really was the change
Mm,
for me, being like, I am choosing, I will not spank my kids. And I have heard plenty of dad influencers say, like, we got to go back to, dads
whooping 'em.
spanking kids, or like, actually they've said we've got to go back to beating children. And I'm like, no, we don't ever have to go back there, because
Yeah.
there's enough pain in life and enough pain in learning. And pain is the ultimate one of the best teachers, if we're willing to kind of like be around, but not just stop everything, right? Like I'm not
Mm,
going to let my son get under the barbell in the gym and have so much weight on there that he can get it off there, but then just drop it on his chest. I'm not going to do that.
yeah.
But he's got a 5 pound weight and he's swinging around doing stuff. I'm gonna be like, hey man, that will hurt if it hits you. And then he gets cracked. Like, like it's a 5 pounder. It's not going to feel good. And he's going to learn from it. Like, oh, that's what dad meant. And that doesn't mean I need to take it from him and keep it from him. So he doesn't get hurt. If he does get hurt, it's like, oh yeah, he'll be more careful the next time because he learned. I don't have to punish him for not listening. He's already crying from getting hit in the toe or the face with a 5 pound weight, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where that's letting life be the teacher, and to a level, and then guiding the way to change course to make it better or easier or smarter
Yeah.
is a great opportunity for a dad, I think.
So let's talk about a little bit about that, man, because you talk about the authoritarian kind of
Mhm.
parenting style, right? Like that,
Yeah,
like like you're gonna respect me because I'm your father type of
yeah,
thing. Like I mean, no, that probably comes from the way we were raised and like the
mhm.
spanking and all that, man. So how do we how do we get away from that? Like what are the alternatives to not fall prey to that and establish that long lasting connection with them without those tactics?
Yeah.
Right.
I think that there's some things that we won't be able to do this with, as I'm learning, especially as they roll through the like puberty side of life, where they just
Mm,
really start to, like, my 9-year-old is getting into that. And so it didn't used to be this way, and I watched it happen with my older two as well. But it's like there's a point at which there's going to be some obstinance. So this, I don't know, like I'm navigating it again, and it's been a minute since one went through this stage.
yeah.
So just relearning some stuff. But what I would say is, um, like, I had this epiphany one day where I was like, who do I want to be like? I mean, when I was little, it was be like Mike, right? I want to be like Mike,
Yeah.
uh, or Bo Jackson, like all these guys that were like beasts, right?
Yeah.
They were Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan could crush on the basketball field. Bo Jackson snapped a baseball bat in midair, like just straight whoosh, like that. And if you've ever grabbed a stick that was like half that thickness and done that, you're like, how did he do that? You know,
Yeah.
I had a baseball card of him snapping one over his leg. These guys were beasts in
Yeah.
in their area of expertise. Now I think about it and I go, well, I like Andy Frisella. So I follow a lot of what he does, right?
Mhm.
But I don't do that because he's mean to me. I do that because he has things I want, or he does things that I want to do. And so I really just translate that into fatherhood. You have to be the man that your kid at every level, because the little ones, they just want to love you, they want to be with you, like the boys specifically. Just my youngest he'll be a year on the 22nd, and
Nice.
he is I'm his dude. Like, he is on me. I mean, if mom brings him to me at all, he's leaping into my arms. He wants to be with dad a lot. So you have this advantage that you're like, it sounds crazy, you're not mom. They kind of see mom as that their own like it's them and their mom are one person,
Mm.
at that age, and you're this other person that they play with and enjoy. So you have an advantage there. They want to be with you, and as they get older, they still see you as like you're a superhero or whatever. And then they hit puberty and they're like, dad doesn't know anything, and that's okay.
Yeah.
They also look to, like, you have to see who they're looking at. And as a guy, we used to look at guys that had abs and were shredded up
Mm.
and be like, I want to look like that. I want to be like that. The guy that has money. So I just go through all those things and go, I have to be the guy they want to be. So what is, like, how do I be the example? So that's why I come back to being the example.
Yeah.
They're going to listen more to the guy they want to be like. And honestly, the guy who yells all the time or spanks all the time, I'm completely breaking connection and the feelings of wanting to be like that. All you're doing in those moments is causing them to be like, I don't like dad
Yeah.
right now. And the more you do it, the more they have that conversation in their head saying, dad's mean, I don't like him. Unfortunately, lots of dads do that because we want the immediate result of them to stop talking or stop doing what we don't like, because it's annoying us more often than not. And I'm bad at this too. Like, I'm still pulling myself out of this authoritarian lifestyle. I think that if we just decide, I'm going to be the example in how I want my children to live, and I'm going to live that example out, because you have to, they will follow suit, because they're going to do what you do, not what you say.
Yeah, I mean, it's that constant reminding ourselves, right, of that. Okay, let's say, let's talk to the dad that has messed this up. All right.
Sure.
Because I've messed this up. And like, maybe it was recent. Maybe it was last night putting them to sleep and you're yelling at them to go to sleep because they're not. All right. And this has happened to me plenty of times. And yeah,
Preach.
yeah, we're all guilty of this. So
Yeah.
how do we come back from that moment? How do we make sure that this doesn't imprint upon their children's minds, and sever that connection? Because
Yeah.
despite us doing that, we still want that connection, right? Like,
Yeah.
and we do realize that we've messed up, but
Yeah.
how do we come back together, and how do we mend that?
I'm a big proponent of apologies. Like, I screwed up and I'm sorry. Our dad ego, it feels like, because I was this way, and I don't know if it's for everybody, but I know I was this way. I didn't want to apologize. I'm dad. I'm right. You were wrong. Well, that's a really crappy way to live or teach, right? So I just, like, if I'm willing to just cut the ego completely and be like, I'm still learning life. I'm still becoming more. I'm always becoming somebody better. I don't look at this as like a 2.0 version of life. This is a 40, like when I turn 45, it'll be Nate 45.0. I'm constantly having to learn and change. And I think the number one thing you can do there is apologize when you screw up. You actually, you get to reconnect because you're apologizing, and you get to teach them how to do that, because our ego always gets in the way, and we don't, whatever it is, it's going to get in the way of some relationship at some point. You have a fight with your wife and they're like, she's wrong, I don't want to apologize. Well, that's really stupid. Even if even if you are right, like, whatever. It's being able to say, I apologize for my side of this. When it comes to your kids, it's, I apologize for what I said or how I said it or what I did. That wasn't That wasn't okay. Here's why. And I'm really sorry. Kids are awesome. They're going to forgive you for forever, right? They
Yeah.
until they're old enough to be like, you were just a jerk the whole time. So just striving to apologize and never be okay with how you acted if you know you acted wrong.
Yeah, and that's good because that they'll remember that too. You know, they'll
Yeah.
remember the fact that you were humble enough to not have that dad ego and stick with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, there's been many moments that I could think of, man, where I've gone in and hear me when I say this, whoever, you know, you're listening, you're watching this, it doesn't matter the age too.
Mm.
You know, they could be 2 years old and they understand. And if you snapped and yelled and, you know, went crossed the line that you probably shouldn't have,
Yeah.
apologize to them. Like go back and mend that, even though they're two and maybe they already forgot technically, but they didn't
Yeah.
forget, man. Like
Yeah.
they know, you
Yeah.
know, and they'll feel that too. They'll
Yeah.
feel the forgiveness. They'll feel that dad still loves them despite everything, you know, despite
Yeah.
all that. So yeah,
I
man,
totally
it's
agree.
good.
And I agree with at any age. I think that a lot of guys hear me and they're like, my kid's 15. Now what? Right.
Mm,
I can say that, okay, so I was married before, had 2 kids, got divorced, got married again, had more kids, right? When the
yeah.
oldest of the littles was born, his name's Finley. When Finley was born, I took the older two and sat down and said, you need to understand something as he was getting older, I guess not right when he was born. I said,
Mm,
you need to understand something. You're going to see me be a dad different than the dad you experienced.
mm,
And it was like, I won't be doing certain things that I did with you. And that's because I've learned and I've grown and I don't want to do those things. I feel bad about those things. So, one, I'm sorry for how I was, but you need to understand that that's not because I love this one more than you. It's
yeah.
because I am older, I've learned more, and I've realized how I was wrong then. And I'm just going to do it differently now. You know, and I've got a 20-year-old who's like, I love it that dad saw that and changed and I get to see him be the dad that I should have had. And I hate how I hear that, but he's saying at that age, my dad should have been the way this dad is, and he wasn't, but he learned and he changed, and that's why he's standing here with these kids now. And
Mm.
that's huge. That takes forgiveness that I've requested and forgiveness that he's given, but it also takes maturity to say, oh, I see what he's talking about. And that honestly, in my opinion, started when I sat down with them on the bed and said, this is going to be different. And you just need to be aware.
Yeah, that's so good, man. Yeah, because you know most won't do that. I've even had like mentors of mine who look back at, you know, who their dad remarried, right, and they had a very the children of the new marriage had a very different upbringing, right? And
Yeah,
then they feel a certain way about that. Like they're like, man,
absolutely.
like yeah, because the dad never went to the older kids and said, hey, I know you guys are seeing me father this one differently, and here's the reason why. I apologize. Like they didn't set that precedence, right? Like, and I think that's the biggest thing I'm hearing, man, is that over communication, right? Of like just communicate, like express it, even if you think they got it, let them know, right? Like
Yeah,
let them know specifically, and that
yeah,
you acknowledge it, and that you understand how they could perceive this. So you want to, you know, you want to get in front of it. So yeah, it's so powerful, man. I love that.
abs- absolutely, man. That's totally true.
Yeah, man. So I want to get into the because you talk about like the self discipline of mind, body, and spirit, right?
Hmm.
So the idea of discipline, we think about you know, you disciplining your child. We talk about like spanking and yelling and getting them to, you know, but how do we teach them discipline? You know, aside from just being the example, I know you talk about that, but
Yeah.
is there like an actual tactical thing, right? Like when the kid is throwing the tantrum in at the, you know, in the store, or
Mm.
they're losing it, and they're like, how do we control those moments in a way that is going to be effective and not, you know, can not affect them in a negative way where we're yelling and coming down on them and trying to teach them discipline that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's a great example of a situation too, because
Mm,
the word you use is how do we control that situation? And
mm,
let's be real, a 3-year-old in that situation, there's no control, right?
yeah,
And so one, I think a lot of that comes from everyone else. Like if I'm in Publix and I've got a meltdown happening, and there's people walking by,
yeah,
I'm not really thinking about how my kid feels. I'm thinking about how they view me.
Mm.
And in truth, that's normal human move. But the part of being a dad is that we get this idea that when people see that, well, I'm not being a good dad. I know I had that. I actually got, like, my own dad would say things about how Zeke acted, and then I would try to force him to do what my dad was kind of saying should be the way he should be.
Mm.
That's not do that. Like, that's crazy. All it did was make me frustrated. It probably hurt his feelings, or I was spanking him or whatever it was. There was just so much because I was trying to make him do what somebody else wanted through my own force. And truthfully, like, the Karen in the aisle in Publix, keep walking, or you got a piece of candy you want to give him, like, why are we stopping staring? You're like, I don't understand. Like, yeah, he's having a meltdown, he's having a rough time. It goes back to that whole thing. They're kids, they're learning this world and all that, right? So, one, it's being able to go, I love my kids, and I don't really care what Joe Blow in the grocery store thinks about how they're feeling right now, because that kid isn't screaming and yelling to bother everyone around them, and they're not screaming and yelling because you suck as a parent. They're having a hard time, and all the emotions you would have of not getting something you want, really want in that moment. Like, you can't look at it like, oh, it's just a piece of candy. Yeah, but to them, that's a huge deal. It's like you getting a bonus check, and then all of a sudden your boss didn't give you the bonus. Yeah, I cut out bonuses this year.
Yeah.
Like that. I just said that, and I'm like, holy cow, that's straight up out of Christmas Vacation. But it's the whole thing. He planned his whole end of his year on that bonus, and then the boss cut bonuses. That's what that piece of candy is like to us,
Yeah.
right? So now you feel that, oh, I can't believe you're doing this. Now we understand how that little one feels,
Mm.
and he doesn't know how to express it either. So screaming is going to be a natural thing. Kicking and hitting is going to be natural because they don't know how to do that. And so it might be removing them from a situation. When I was like in my 20s and I had my first kid, I saw a kid in Walmart like having a meltdown, and I walked by. I was like, somebody needs spanked. And I'm like, I look at that and I'm like, that guy should get punched in his face, right?
Very.
That's no. What that parent needs is like, hey, it's all right. That's crazy. Kids do all this stuff. That's what they need. They need someone to look in and go, oh man, I've been there. That's rough. But removing them from the situation, not to spank them in the bathroom, but to get them in a place where you can be like straight on with them and have that conversation, or let them, take them someplace where it's just you and them, and then you can help them breathe. Like, I will hold my 4-year-old. I will hold her face and be like, all right, breathe with me.
Mm.
And she doesn't want to do that every time. But when she does that, she starts to relax because, we're breathing in slow, we're breathing out slow. It calms the nervous system.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to spank or scream or any of that. I just have to like hold her and breathe. That's not going to be a 2-minute experience. It might be a 10 minutes experience.
Yeah.
And again, that's why there's no productivity around kids, because that's not what it's about. It's about connection and time. And what we don't want to do, what we want to do as dads, because we're like on a productive mindset, is we want to, all right, you need to stop doing that because we need to get the groceries and we need to get out of here, and then you can have your meltdown, or then you're just not going to have your meltdown because I said you can't have it, right?
Yeah.
But I literally was holding the youngest today, and obviously he's not even a year old. Like, why would I spank him? Why would I be yelling at him, right? And he's leaning into my neck, and I'm like just rubbing the back of his neck. And I realized, holy cow, this kid, I'm a safe place for this kid. And the moment I raise my voice or smack his butt, I'm no longer safe. And he
Yeah.
doesn't know what to do because I've been safe his whole life. Right? So the moment we start smacking and spanking or screaming, we are no longer safe to them, and they have nowhere else to go. They will literally, you can spank them, they will be crying and hurt and not know what's going on, and then reach for the person who spanked them to hold them because they know no other place to go. Right? And that's where, for me with dads, I'm like, stop hitting your kids, stop screaming and yelling. I know I'm still working on that too, because it gets frustrating, but you lose so much connection with them because you're this safe place, and now the safe place isn't safe. Well, where do they go?
Yeah.
That's like, I just keep putting them back into this like, look at their tiny hands, like look how small they are. and understand all the feelings we have, all the emotions we have that we have the cognitive ability to work through, they don't have. And I got to see them as a new person to this world who doesn't understand everything. They don't understand why they can't have the piece of candy. But if I can take it all the way out to a $75,000 bonus, I'd be pretty pissed off too. Right.
Yeah.
So if I can look at it like that, now I get why he's screaming and yelling, because that's a $75,000 bonus to him. You know?
Yeah, that's a powerful perspective, man. I think with respect to like the hitting, the spanking, and all that, one of the things you said on the and I didn't catch the beginning of the mentor call that you did in Apogee. I got kind of the end of it.
Yeah.
But one of the things you said, man, that really resonated with me is like, well, you wouldn't hit your wife, right? And you said, and you're like, you wouldn't hit your wife, right? Like, well, then why would you hit your kid? Like, your kid came from your wife. Your kid
Oh,
came from the both of you, right? So
yeah.
why would you want to do? When you said that, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's powerful. Like, that's a good perspective to have.
I mean, you're constantly telling, I love you. Yeah. And you really do. You love them. I
Yeah.
love you. I'm your safe place. I care more about you than anyone else in the world. But I'm going to hit you? What? I,
Yeah.
I mean, what am I teaching in that moment? I mean, if I'm spanking my daughters, what am I teaching them? And I know, like, boys and girls, I'm the kind of guy that's like, boys are different from girls. So I raise them differently, not because I care more about one than the other, but because I'm actively looking at the femininity of my daughters and the masculine sons, and I'm interacting with them on that level.
Yeah.
What am I teaching? What am I teaching them? Well, like they go to, if you send your kid to daycare, like, no, like, no
No shame.
judgment if you do that. But you send your kid to daycare and they're like, yeah, your kid's hitting. Well, yeah, I've taught them that, because when I'm upset with them or when things are not going my way, I spank them. So of course they're going to hit.
Yeah.
What that they do what we do, not what we say. That's hard. It's hard, but they are a living mirror of us, right? And they're just like, this is you. And man, sometimes that face is ugly. I don't want to look at it.
It's a tough one, man. I get it, but man, that's what this whole thing is about, is for us to be better, for us,
Yeah.
from learn those mistakes. You're listening to this right now, you're watching this, man, like, you've made that mistake. We've made that mistake. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to keep making it.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep doing it.
You don't.
You can definitively decide to do something different, man, and parent in a different way, and try it. See what kind of results you're going to get. You've already tried the other tactics. Let's try something new. Let's try something different, right?
Yeah. I've had people say to me, like, people have looked at me and said, like, this way doesn't work. I don't like gentle parenting because it makes it sound, maybe it's because of being a guy, but I'm like, that sounds such like weak. It sounds weak. I want to be conscious. I'm consciously thinking about what I'm doing. Right. But like, I've had people say to me, well, gentle parenting doesn't work. And I'm going, well, is what you're doing working? Like, do you feel connected to your kids? And if you don't, try something different, right? Try something different. Let's just say you give it a year and you're like, I'm not going to yell. And you know what? You're going to fail. You're going to fall and you're going to screw up and you're going to yell. And that's when you go, I didn't want to do this and I did it. So I'm going to apologize and I'm going to, work through that. And if give it a year. If after a year you still have the same kid and you're frustrated and all that, well, then go back to the way you were doing it. But I can guarantee you won't have the same kid. You won't have the same relationship and you won't ever go back. I can guarantee it.
Bro, I mean, I could keep talking to you for another hour, man, but I want to honor your time. I love this conversation. I love that I love the fact that you took the time, man, and to come and pour into our audience here.
Absolutely.
At Alpha Dad, man. So appreciate that very much. Where can we go to follow you, man, to support you, to support everything that you're doing? I think I was watching the Epic Dad podcast in preparation. Like, you were on Drew Camp's show about a year ago now, I think.
Yeah.
And you were talking about writing like a book or so. Like, is that still in the works? Yeah.
Okay. I have been slow to it, but it's still in the works. It's one that I've kind of slowed off on it because I want to start some other things that will allow me to launch that better. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's still in there. That same book is still on the works. But yeah, I mean, the major thing for me right now is Instagram. And then, I mean, guys can find me they can email me at nate@dadsdon'tbabysit.tv, or Instagram. It's easy if they message me. I actually check all the hidden messages, everything, because I don't want to miss somebody actually reaching out. Like, you get a lot of crap,
Yeah.
but also try to check that, because every once in a while there's a guy that somehow it got in there, and I want to make sure I respond. It may take a couple days to catch it, because I turn all my notifications off on Instagram. So if I don't think about being on Instagram and I'm not on there, I don't get any of the messages. But I try to look. But that's a great way to find me. I'm going to be, I was telling you, I got the stuff to start a podcast. I just decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk to guys like you and guys like Drew, like, just bring them on and chat more about what's going on in their life and how they're becoming better and becoming better fathers. And if people join in on that and want to follow, great. Like, that's awesome. But that podcast is probably going to be more for me to grow than anything else. And if it helps other people grow, then I'm in for it for sure.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. I'm excited for you to start that.
Thanks,
I'm
man.
telling you right now, man, like, just from experience, this is episode 50 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's, and I started as a YouTube channel, so I didn't add the podcast component until a little bit later.
Yeah.
So it's been a life-changing experience, man, to just get to chat with guys like yourself, who are on a very similar mission. Like, we're on the same mission, man, to help dads, to help families, to help the world get better. Right.
Yeah.
And, dude, the connections, the networking of opportunities, but also just, you learn so much. Just from having these conversations, like, you learn so much. So, I'm excited for you, man. And if I can be of service to you in any way there, man, like, always, I'm always here, man. So let me know.
I love that. And I'll bring you on. It'll be, I set it up to where I think the first one I want to do is actually me and my oldest talking about how I was and how I am. And so
that's awesome.
like, we actually shot one, and it was like, we talked about how, like, stuff cuts off and technology doesn't work. We shot one, and the tech was so bad. The audio was bad and nothing matched. And so I tried to fix it, and it was not good. So we'll sit down and do another one, and we'll get that going. I'm really excited about it.
Nice, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll put everything in the show notes as well, underneath the video and everything. So,
Cool.
well, appreciate you, Nate. Thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Absolutely.
I'll catch you soon, brother.
That sounds good, man. Thanks.
1, 2, 3 actions I didn't meet. 4, 5, 6 fear and silence begin to mix. 7, 8, 9 the thought of being emotionless started taking over my mind.